Imagine stepping back in time to the year 1692, to a small, isolated Puritan town called Salem, Massachusetts. Here, in this cold, wind-swept corner of the New World, life was hard and faith was everything. The world was seen as a battlefield between God and the devil was very, very real. It is in this pressure cooker of fear and religious fervor that one of America's most infamous chapters begins. It all started quietly, in the home of Reverend Samuel Parris, his 9-year-old daughter, Betty, and his 11-year-old niece, Abigail Williams, began to act strangely. They would scream for no reason, contort their bodies into impossible shapes, and complain of being pinched and bitten by invisible forces. Soon, other girls in the village started showing the same terrifying symptoms. The local doctor, William Griggs, was baffled. After exhausting every medical explanation he knew, he concluded with a single, chilling diagnosis: the girls were under an evil hand. In other words, they were bewitched. This wasn't just a diagnosis. It was a spark thrown into a tinderbox of superstition and social anxiety. The community, already on edge from recent smallpox outbreaks, conflicts with Native American tribes, and deep-seated rivalries, demanded answers. Who was responsible? Under immense pressure from the magistrates, the afflicted girls began to name names. The first 3 to be accused were exactly who you might expect: outsiders. Tituba, Reverend Parris's enslaved woman from the Caribbean; Sarah Good, a homeless beggar; and Sarah Osborne, an elderly woman who rarely attended church. They were easy targets, women on the fringes of society with no one to defend them. Tituba, likely under duress or torture, confessed. But she didn't just confess to witchcraft. She wove a fantastic, terrifying tale of a devil's book, of riding on sticks through the night, and of a conspiracy of witches working to destroy Salem. Crucially, she claimed there were other witches in the village, serving the devil alongside her. Her confession transformed a small-scale panic into a full-blown witch hunt. It confirmed the community's worst fears. There was a satanic plot unfolding right under their noses. The accusations began to snowball. Suddenly, it wasn't just social outcasts being named. Respected, church-going members of the community found themselves accused. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Old family feuds and property disputes were settled with accusations of witchcraft. The hysteria had a logic of its own, and it was deadly. If you were accused, you were trapped. If you denied it, you were seen as defiant and unrepentant, likely leading to a trial and execution. But if you confessed, you might be spared. On one condition: you had to name other witches. This system created a self-perpetuating cycle of accusations, fueling the fire and ensuring that more and more people were dragged into the nightmare. The legal proceedings that followed were a complete mockery of justice. The court accepted something called spectral evidence. This meant that if an accuser claimed your ghost, or specter, appeared to them in a dream and tormented them, it was considered valid proof against you. How could anyone possibly defend themselves against something like that? It was a person's word against another's, and the court consistently sided with the hysterical, shrieking accusers in the courtroom. Imagine standing trial, pleading for your life, while a group of girls on the other side of the room scream that your spirit is choking them at that very moment. Your fate was sealed before you even spoke. One of the first to be hanged was Bridget Bishop, an outspoken woman who owned a tavern and was known for her colorful clothing. Her independent spirit made her an easy target. She maintained her innocence to the very end. As the summer of 1692 wore on, the gallows on Proctor's Ledge became a regular sight of death. People like Rebecca Nurse, a pious, 71-year-old grandmother, were executed despite a petition signed by many of her neighbors attesting to her good character. The former Salem minister, George Burroughs, was also hanged. As he stood on the gallows, he recited the Lord's Prayer perfectly, something a witch was supposedly unable to do. The crowd wavered, but the spell of the accusers was too strong. The execution went ahead. Perhaps the most brutal story is that of Giles Corey, an 81-year-old farmer. When he was accused, he knew the trial was a sham. He refused to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. By refusing to plead, he could not be legally tried, and this meant the state couldn't confiscate his property, which would then be passed down to his sons. The court's response was barbaric. They subjected him to peine forte et dure, or pressing. He was laid on the ground, a wooden board was placed on his chest, and heavy stones were piled on top, one by one, to force a plea. For 2 days, he endured the agony. His only response to their demands was a defiant, "More weight." Giles Corey was pressed to death, a martyr to the madness, protecting his family's legacy with his last breath. By September, the hysteria had reached its peak. 19 people had been hanged. Giles Corey was pressed to death, and at least 5 others, including Sarah Osborne, died in the squalid conditions of the prison. The jails were overflowing with accused men, women, and even a 4-year-old child, Dorothy Good, who was chained to a wall. So what finally stopped the madness? It stopped when the accusations went too far. The accusers, emboldened by their power, began pointing fingers at the upper echelons of society. They accused wealthy merchants, respected ministers, and even the wife of the governor of Massachusetts, Lady Mary Phips. Suddenly, the powerful people who had allowed the trials to happen realized that they, too, could be next. The elite began to question the validity of spectral evidence and the entire process. Governor Phips intervened. He ordered a halt to the proceedings and dissolved the special court. New courts were formed that disallowed spectral evidence. Without it, the cases fell apart. The remaining prisoners were slowly released, and the witch hunt was finally over. But the shadow it cast was long and dark. In the years that followed, Salem had to reckon with what it had done. The community was shattered. Lives were destroyed, families torn apart, and the town's reputation was ruined forever. Samuel Sewell, one of the main judges, stood up in church and publicly confessed his error and guilt, asking for forgiveness. And Putnam Jr., one of the most prolific accusers, also offered a public apology years later, claiming she had been deluded by Satan into accusing innocent people. The Massachusetts government formally apologized and offered financial compensation to the families of the victims. But why did it happen? Historians have debated this for centuries. There was no single cause, but a perfect storm of factors. The extreme religious beliefs of the Puritans, who saw the world as a constant battle with the devil, provided the framework. Social and economic tensions between different factions in the village created a landscape of resentment and suspicion. And then there was the mass hysteria, a psychological phenomenon where a group of people collectively experience bizarre and irrational beliefs and behaviors. Some have even theorized that a fungus called ergot, which can grow on rye and cause muscle spasms and hallucinations, might have contaminated the town's grain supply and triggered the initial symptoms. Whatever the precise combination of causes, the Salem Witch Trials stand as a chilling true story and a powerful cautionary tale. It's a story about what happens when fear replaces reason, when suspicion replaces trust, and when a community turns on itself. It serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of extremism, the importance of due process, and the fragility of justice in the face of mass panic. It's a dark chapter in history, but one we must never forget, to ensure that the ghosts of Salem never rise again. Thank you for watching. If you found this story as fascinating and important as we did, please hit that like button, and subscribe for more deep dives into the most compelling stories from history. We'll see you in the next one.